Hello, everybody. Okay, welcome. Looking for the monitor. There we go. Okay, thanks, AGP. Welcome, everybody. Tonight is Tuesday, March 24th. We're at the Moore Bay Veterans Hall at 4:30. This is a special meeting between the Planning Commission and the City Council, and we will be reviewing the draft work plan for the General Plan and Local Coastal Plan Program Update, and we will be turning this over. Just for the record, all council members are present. We do have a quorum, and Mr. Chair of the Planning Commission, if you want to establish your quorum.
Four of the five planning commissioners are present. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will we'll go to public comment for this session of the meeting, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Graham for the staff report. So at this time, anybody would like to speak to our joint meeting between our plan for the plan and our review of the program? Public comment is open. Thank you.
Thank you, Council and Planning Commission and staff. My name is Marla Jo Bruton, and I'm from North Morro Bay. The agenda for today's meeting is review of draft work plan for the General Plan Local Coastal Program GPLCP update. And but I have a copy of a February 4th memorandum for City Council and staff, subject 2015-16 City Goals and Objectives, third draft. And in this, it gives a list of 10 priority projects for the city. And I'd like to know if we're supposed to take this as being in order. Like the first one on here is the top priority, second priority. I'm happy to see that the first priority is the water reclamation facility. Work to be done on that. Then after that, I'm a little dismayed because our goal number 9 is improve water supply diversification, and excuse me, it's my understanding that that this draft is basically pulling things out of a revision sort of from the 2013-2014 version of this plan, and that was completed in May of 2013 or 2014. Anyway, my point is that in May of 2014, there was a presentation to the Regional Water Board by myself and another citizen here with regards to the source of the nitrates in our Morro Bay Basin drinking water wells. And we gave a 20-minute presentation, and then there was a 2-hour discussion on that presentation. And out of that resulted the regional board members requested that Morro Bay do a sample for testing to see if indeed sewage is a contributor in the nitrates in that well field. Prior to that, the city had ruled out that sewage had anything to do with that nitrate contamination. So the results that came in January indicate that indeed sucralose in a significant quantity is in all of our wells that are west of Main Street, on the way towards the treatment plant, and the eastern upgrade do not have sucralose.
I'm going to have to ask you to conclude, Marla.
Okay, my conclusion is I would really appreciate it if there would be a serious, open, and transparent discussion about this with the City Council in public.
Thanks, Marla.
And perhaps I could give you a presentation.
Thank you, Marla. Anybody else for public comment?
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council, members of the Planning Commission that are here, and city staff. I should introduce myself. I'm Casey Caldwell, a Morro Bay resident. I live on Estero. And a city's general plan is its constitution for development. Funding for the general plan update must take precedence over other city projects. Ours is outdated and it lacks clear guidance with regards to smart growth strategies. I ask you to make the general plan update the highest priority and to use Dynegy funds to do so if the existing budget and grant funding doesn't cover it. Within the general plan update, I am requesting that neighborhood compatibility be the first thing that is addressed. The lack of a definitive guideline opens the city to lawsuits, exhausts the administrative system, and consumes large amounts of staff time and resources that could be available for use elsewhere, as well as creating an impossible situation for those who are trying to develop properties and those who oppose mansionization. I appreciate the effort that Scott Graham has put into the first draft. He clearly did a lot of work on this project. I also know that you, as members of the City Council and the Planning Commission, haven't received much, if any, public comment on this document. There are several areas of the draft that do not reflect the views of many residents. The draft has had important language softened or deleted. The area of neighbor notification is smaller than we'd like. Landscaping provisions aren't comprehensive enough. There are a number of areas which need to be addressed. So while I'd like to see neighborhood compatibility have the highest priority in the general plan update, I don't want the draft adopted in its present form. More work is needed, and quickly. With that, I want to again remind all of you here and those watching from home that there is a neighborhood compatibility meeting tomorrow night. It's a community forum. It's at 7 p.m. at the Morro Bay Community Center. Come listen, learn what other cities are doing, and share your thoughts on the new guidelines. It's very important, and the City Council can't act without your input. So thank you very much for the time to address you.
Thank you, Casey. Anybody else for public comment?
Good afternoon. I'm Kenny Blackwell. I live at 411 Fresno Avenue. Thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon. I'll be very brief. I'm also concerned about the neighborhood compatibility guidelines, and I also feel it really needs to be a priority. And as far as I can see in the most recent update of, I guess we call it the working draft of the compatibility guidelines, I'm concerned about the deletion of Section I, which was the solar access. My conversations with two solar companies, one being Sunrun Solar, which used to be REC, they've told me that they've installed 40 solar grids in Morro Bay, 80 in Los Osos, 20 in Cayucas. I also spoke to Joe at Pacific Energy in Atascadero. They have installed between 30 and 50 solar systems between Los Osos and Cambria. He wasn't sure how many in Morro Bay have specifically been installed by them, but both of these people assured me that they are working systems. I know there's some concern about, because we have some fog and we have some overcast, that it's maybe not an issue, but I think it's important on many levels that we continue to have some kind of regulation that will forward the use of solar. And my only other concern was some of the wording has been deleted with regard to second floor decks and balconies. I'd like to see that maybe reviewed. I don't know if there's an alternate proposal about those, but it seems like it was, the wording was softened. So those are my two main points, and I'm hoping that there's time for, some more public input in regards to the compatibility guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment?
My name is Judy Walters. I live at 385 Arbutus Avenue. I'm here in support of promoting a thoughtful look and putting into the plan of the Neighborhood Compatibility Committee or moving forward with that. I have concerns about the quality of life in our neighborhoods with larger homes, the unsustainability of the amount of resources that the larger homes are using, especially since we're in a very, probably, hopefully not, but permanent drought. And going from smaller homes to larger ones is a big use of resources. And I'm also, we have been homeowners since 1985, raised our family here. And I am just personally hoping that Morro Bay listens to some of the neighborhood folks who would like to keep our neighborhoods in the character of the small town that we are. The population hasn't changed here almost in 30 years. Don't quote me on that, but I remember the signs always said 10,000 something for as long as I can remember. And there's a reason for that. We don't have resources, we don't have room, and if the only room is to go up, I think we have to be very careful with how we move forward with that. Thank you for letting me speak today. Appreciate your listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walters. Public comment is still open for those who would like to speak to public comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Silloway. I'm a resident of Morro Bay. I'm really excited that you're taking this project on, and given the proposed budget in this, we realize it's huge. It's going to take a long time. It's a difficult job. But a couple comments. In your December 2nd meeting with 16 people, I was sort of surprised to see that only one person apparently put improving the city's economic standing, recruitment, and economic growth as the #1 priority. But that's all right. That's the way it is. That's going down a little further then. On the first page of the draft work plan, under About Morro Bay, it says, economic vitality is the foremost priority for the general plan LCP update. That sounds like a vision preemption to me, and I hope that that's not what's going to happen in this process. On page 10 of the draft work plan, there's an extensive set of meetings for public input. Public input can be structured so that it seems formally inputting, but not really making a difference. I hope that this process runs so it makes a difference. The citizens that are here tonight talking about neighborhood compatibility, it's an important issue, but obviously there's some passion out there around that issue, but also other ones. And we need to hear that, and if this process is set up so that you really hear it, and it really makes a difference, we'll get a good plan. We're embarking now on a difficult process. Coming up with a vision is amorphous, and it's hard, but it's probably the most important step. Phase 1 is the most important step. The things that follow it will get more technical and easier. I wish you luck, and you have my support. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Anybody else for public comment? I'll bring it back, close public comment, bring it back to council. And just to restate, this is a review of the draft work plan for the general plan of local coastal program update. So I think Mr. Graham will go through the staff report on all the steps that take place, may answer some or all of your questions out there. Neighborhood compatibility, water, those are all elements within the general plan. There were some specific questions in regard to neighborhood compatibility guidelines that I think, if Scott, you want to reply to that, but I think that's something that's in process right now, and certainly those comments are well heard up here. I think we'll listen to that and look forward to the meeting tomorrow night as well. But Scott, do you want to open up?
Just to start, if I could, on addressing the public comment on neighborhood compatibility specifically, then I'll turn it over to Scott for
Thanks.
the plan for the plan. So, great comments, and the council has made that issue a priority by putting it on the objectives for this year, which run through summer of 2016. So those goals that were identified with the first public speaker, there are now objectives underneath there. One of those objectives is to publish what we're going to call interim neighborhood compatibility guidelines this year. Scott's leading that effort. You all have seen some of the draft documents. It will go to Planning Commission before it comes, at least once before it comes to council for consideration and approval. So there will be significant opportunity for public input, not just comment, but input and listening with the Planning Commission. And then, so this calendar year, we intend to have those interim guidelines finalized and published, and then they could be modified slightly as we go through the general plan process, and then that modified final neighborhood compatibility guidelines will be published as part of the general plan. So I guess I'd just say it's so important that we're going to at least get an interim set done before the general plan is even done, because the general plan is probably a 3-year process, and we want to have interim guidelines in place before the end of that 3-year process. Scott.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. That was well
Yeah,
said.
thank you.
And is something that will be going back to the Planning Commission for future review. So it's nice that we have a group that's interested in it now. We've had a hard time getting folks to come to those meetings, and so maybe we won't have such a difficult time moving forward. Moving on with the plan for the plan. This is sort of the next phase in the general plan and local coastal program update. As you're all aware, we had a workshop on this. On the plan for the plan back in December of 2014. It's taken a little while to come forward. It's not because of any failing on the part of the consultant PMC, who's in the audience here, represented by Tammy Seal and Jeff Henderson. We had to delay bringing this forward because we had some issues with our grant programs and grant agreements for the LCP update, kind of working out timelines. We're running, the general plan LCP timeline in a 3-year process. The grant timeline was a little bit less, and so we had to get some concurrence on the part of the Coastal Commission that they'd be able to work with us to accommodate the larger picture, which was to update our general plan and LCP comprehensively. After a little back and forth, they agreed that was acceptable, and then so we're now moving forward, hence we're here this evening, to review the draft work plan. Again, I indicated that there are representatives from PMC in the audience, and so if there are questions as we move forward that relate to content and why things look the way they do and what have you, they can certainly answer those questions. The workshop that we had back in December was attended by all of the council members here. Some of you were council members-elect at the time, and the 5 of our planning commissioners, staff, and various stakeholders. So we got a lot of good input at that meeting. I think there were everybody that was at the meeting at the workshop was engaged and provided a lot of really good comment, which you find resulted in some of the portions of the work plan, or that you see throughout the work plan. The intent behind the workshop was to identify general plan and LCP update priorities, to define the work scope of the document and key issues, and then to identify the necessary expertise to carry out the update, and that's going to be the makeup of the consultant group that we eventually end up hiring to do this, in the form of traffic engineers, biologists, those types of folks. It helped inform the nature of the community engagement that the folks at the workshop were interested in, and then finally to create a timeline for the update. The PMC prepared 4 work products. You find those attached to the staff report this evening. First, you have the workshop summary. That's pretty self-explanatory. It's as attachment 1. It outlines the information that was it outlines the input components that went into the workshop, and the different sessions that we had in the workshop and condenses that into the document. We have the draft work plan. So that's the plan for the plan itself. That's the portion I hope you paid a lot of attention to, because that's what's going to inform the eventual RFP that we send out. So hopefully you all have the opportunity to take a good look at that. We have in attachment 3, we have the budget estimate and timeline. I'm sure you all took a long look at that. And we'll discuss that in greater detail a little bit later. And then finally, there's a review document in there that they put together that takes a look at the general plan and local coastal program policies, and then takes a look at what current state law is. Our documents are quite old, and so we find ourselves now in where the documents are inconsistent in some places, and so it identifies those types of inconsistencies. The topics that are noted in the work plan deal with the specialists that will be needed. So those are the consultants. It addresses and defines milestones and deliverables. It outlines what type of public engagement we'd be looking at having, whether that be workshops, neighborhood workshops, larger workshops like we had that would be held in this room, joint workshops with Planning Commission, City Council, pop-up workshops, those types of things. It also discusses, that we'd have probably a web page, and identifies that we'd probably have some survey information that would be part of that as well. And also lays out and discusses the type of environmental documents we'd be looking at, probably in the form of the top tier document anyway, being a programmatic EIR that we would eventually tier off of for the remainder of the update effort. And then again, it outlines a timeline. There are two sort of broad categories, broad issue categories that are noted in the work plan. One of them dealing with issues that were brought up associated with Morro Bay, and then the second broad category is issues related to the existing general plan and LCP documents. And so the first one, Morro Bay issues to be addressed, would be to strengthen economic vitality, improve circulation system investments, improve neighborhood compatibility guidance. I think we have some folks interested in that here this evening. Looking at reuse of the Dynegy site and existing wastewater site. It's kind of interesting, if you look at some of these, you note that we have the LEAP item on the later council agenda, and so that's reinforcing a lot of things that you see here. That's a good thing. You want to see that that's a consistent thread that's going through the efforts that the city is engaging in right now, and that's a good thing. Moving on, sustainability, that deals with resource protection, protection of the bay resources and other environmental or sensitive habitat areas. Emphasis on the working waterfront and continuation of revitalization of the commercial fishing industry. Issues concerning the general plan LCP update, so of the documents themselves, and that's to improve accessibility and usability of those documents. They're convoluted, often contradictory, and I think the total page count is somewhere around 1,100 for both documents. That's almost unusable. So we need to streamline and shorten, hopefully, and to provide more clarity. You see where we want engage. We have an engaged and active community, so there's going to be a volunteer effort that we need here. There's going to be a working group, a general plan update group that has to be identified, and that's noted in both of our grant applications as well. So there's going to be some type of appointed group the council will be looking at moving forward to review grant funding opportunities, to maximize our existing grant awards. So that would be the Ocean Protection Sea Level Rise Grant and the Coastal Commission Grant as it currently stands. And then again, looking at the project team that I discussed earlier as far as what the consultant and what their makeup is and what's needed to carry out the update. The work plan is broken down into 4 phases. The first one being project initiation and community engagement. And there's timeframes associated with that. We were delayed a little bit in trying to work out the grant issues that we had. So you see that first phase was to be carried out from March of 2015 through June. I just kind of pushed it back a little bit based on the hope that we can get the RFP out in April and with responses back in May. So you see the timelines adjusted accordingly. And I adjusted them throughout. These are rough timelines and will be more defined once we do get proposals back and we choose a consultant. The second item you see there is blueprint plan and EIR. That's basically the LCP and general plan document itself, and then the programmatic EIR that we talked about. The third one being the green print plan, and that's going to be the conservation and resource protection component of the plan. Finally, we have the coastal implementation plan, and that's going to be the zoning code. So that's how that's the implementation on the ground that we would use on a day-to-day basis. The work plan includes a budget estimate. The budget document's included in attachment 3. It breaks down costs by fiscal year, phase, and by specific task. Budget includes ranges for the high, average, and low costs, and then it also includes estimated total costs. It identifies what our grant resources are, and then it also identifies funding gaps. So the real meat of that is you see in the estimates, you have a low cost of about $800,000. You have a high cost of about $1.6 million, and an average in the middle there about $1.2 million. We have actual resources in grant funding of $397,000. We have about $100,000 in general plan maintenance funds. I have put as a placeholder in our upcoming budget another $100,000 that was from the Dynegy funds that we have out there. It would be nice if maybe we had a little bit of conversation about that moving forward. And in the staff report, you note where I identified that we had a Caltrans grant out there for $250,000. We got word that we were not successful in obtaining that grant. That word came down Friday. So we'll continue to look at grant funding opportunities moving forward. But again, we weren't successful in that specific one. Finally, what we'd like you to do this evening would be to review the work plan, to provide a comment on the draft work plan and the budget, to provide opportunity maybe for the public to comment. You did that already, I guess. And then finally, if there's not a lot of changes that are requested, to direct that we complete the work plan, probably send it back to you on a consent item, agenda, and then have us move forward with the RFP preparation. Again, the anticipated goal would be to send it out in April. That's all I have for you. So let's hear the questions, comments, what have you. And again, there's myself, and we have PMC available to answer those questions moving forward.
Great, Scott, thanks very much, and thanks PMC for coming tonight for any input or comments or questions. With that, we can turn it back over to council for questions. We've already gone through public comment on this. We can fold into questions and then go into discussion and comments. So turn to my right. Anybody would like to lead off on this, or we look into our comments and questions? We can start with our Planning Commission. Dr. Teft, would you like to lead off with some questions from your esteemed commission?
Sure. I'll open it up for our members. Kathleen? Sure.
Scott, on those budget numbers, the average is being about $1.2 million. That is over the whole course of the engagement, so that would take us through 2017. And then what you have available, which is roughly $500,000, that would be a one-time availability for just 2015, or is that over the whole course of the engagement?
That's what we have available currently. That excludes we're in the process of preparing draft budgets, so additional funds could be put forward towards that effort. That was the Dynegy money I was referring to, and that we've at least identified that as a potential funding source.
But then you would still have 2016 budget and 2017 budget to help offset. I'm just going in the middle, the $1.2 million.
That's correct. And what will happen is we'll take a look at what our identified funds are when we move forward with the RFP and we engage with the consultant to enter into a contract. We'll identify a final budget amount that will be able to be altered over time as more funding becomes available, say more grant funds or that type of thing become available, or future budget years we allocate more funds towards it, then we would be able to increase and bolster that effort.
One follow-up question. In addition, when you're looking at that $1.2 million, is that evenly spread, or is there a lot more upfront costs? I would imagine, at least I would think, that some of the $400,000, the $500,000 you have available probably would be your first year costs, or is it over the?
It's over some of those costs are later in the second years, and we really get into the bulk of it when we start working on the the base plan, base general plan update, LCP update, and then the environmental document that goes with it. Those two pieces, as they roll through the process, we'll be spending a lot of resources on that. So in the beginning, we'll be doing initial engagement and identifying priorities and those types of things. That'll be a little less expensive, so first year type stuff. But it will get more expensive as we start really diving in and taking the information that comes out of those workshops, those neighborhood engagement, those surveys that we do, and really putting those into policy. And then engaging the environmental folks to start backing that up and to help with that process, and then going into the environmental document, which is an EIR level document. So those are some pretty hefty costs that are associated with that.
Thank you.
Mike?
Scott, I guess my biggest issues are about the timeline involved, and especially the components about what comes first in terms of neighborhood compatibility versus the individual neighborhood potential overlay zones. Could you talk about what a good critical path is for that, given because these dates you just showed changed from what we had in our packet coming in. So I'm a little concerned about the timeline, about how those things get resolved.
I literally just tweaked it by a couple of months based on we've passed some of the dates right now. We don't have an RFP out, so we're not starting the process yet, so I pushed that forward a little bit. I mean, it was literally a couple of months. But, remember, the general plan is going to be the top-tier land use document. The important part for the neighborhood compatibility is going to be at the end when we do the implementation plan. That's the zoning code. So that's where we're going to put those policies in play. The general plan is going to identify that we have this as a goal as a city, and that's an objective. And it's going to say you're going to implement this, and it probably gives some general guidance to that effect. But it's really going to push that into the implementation plan or the zoning code, because that's where the policies are going to be specifically laid out. And so that is going to be the final version of that will be at the end process.
And the one part that I noted was that the community assessment was they wanted to be involved. There was a spectrum of engagement, and the middle point was involve. So is that involvement the part that you're talking about would occur over the summer and into the fall, or is it down the line after we start implementing the whole revision? It's
going to be constant engagement because there are several elements, there are 7 required elements, and probably some additional ones that we will be adding to the general plan. As we go into addressing each one of those elements, there's probably going to be some engagement component to each of those. We might combine some efforts, but there's going to be ongoing engagement throughout the process. And once we're done with the general plan LCP piece of it and the environmental documents that go with that, we're going to be developing and putting together the zoning code, which is the implementation plan. And there's going to be engagement as part of that, because now you're going to be talking about the specific on-the-ground policies that we're using. Those are going to be very interested to some folks, like folks in the audience. That's going to be continued and ongoing.
And I guess
if I could just, excuse me, I think that involvement, as Scott said, absolutely needs to be it started on the 2nd December when there were a number of residents not associated with various commissions or staff in the plan process, and one thing that we should consider doing while we're getting the RFP out on the street and waiting to respond to that is to establish a GPLCP Citizens Advisory Committee. That committee can become established as one step of involvement, and then it is sort of neat to see how a lot of the things that we're working on, it's not just neat, it's appropriate, are sort of kludging together and synthesizing with each other. The goals and objectives document, one of the key goals and objectives we have for this year is to develop, and I say we, the whole community, is to develop the vision, the mission, and the values of Morro Bay. And so if we establish a citizen advisory committee, let's say in the next couple of weeks, they could start now working with the community and with staff and council and everybody. And if we went into the meat of developing a general plan, local coastal plan with a vision, values, and mission, thank you. Vision, mission, values. How did I miss mission? What a great way to start, and as a as an overarching document, so really we know what we want to be, and then we can develop a general plan, local coastal plan that takes us to where we want to be. So, just a comment on public involvement in general is, I think there's certainly a consensus among staff and council. I know that it needs to be constant.
Like, the only other two things I was interested in terms of the time is they're on different tracks. Is the wastewater treatment plant resolution potentially means there's an area on our waterfront that may have opportunities, and so that's not exactly a precise date, but it's getting precise as we move through this process. And then the other one is more ambiguous, and that's the Dynergy site. And is there a mechanism to know what's happening with that right now? I know there was some things that were for sale, and then apparently they were withdrawn for sale. I mean, how does that impact our timeline here, since that's such an important part of what we're going to be planning around?
Our planning effort here for the general plan is this is a really good, we have good timing now, because we have the Dynergy plant, and we know that we're probably going to have a wastewater treatment plant site, the existing site for reuse, brownfield reuse, whatever you want to call that. So the general plan is a great document for that, because we're going to be going through this update process. It's going to identify those things as properties that we want to see reuse for, and so that'll be included in the public outreach and the workshops that we have. And so that'll lead to an end probably policy that says the city will develop a master plan for those areas, or it'll be some sort of implementing document, and that we go to. That's what general plans kind of do. They'll kind of identify the interests that are in the community, and then it'll give you direction of what to do about those things. And so one of the things that you could have for those areas, again, is like a master plan or specific plan or what have you. And so it would tell you, city, go do that. And so then you can budget for that accordingly years down the road. That's how it's supposed to work. So that's probably how it would look when we were done.
So at this point, it's not really an absolute critical path part of the plan, but it's included in there.
It is part of it. Yeah, it is part of it, and I think it's going to be one that many folks are interested, I would think, given that we have the plant sitting there not being used, and that potentially the wastewater treatment plant's going to come to an end here within the next 5 or so years. So,
I just comment that the plan is going to be able to, and we can address those things to a different level of fidelity based on what each of those is or are. So the power plant, for example, while we've got influence, we don't have control. The wastewater treatment plant, we essentially have control, and in fact, it is just in case anybody from Cayucas is listening in, they do have an interest in that site, and we'll have to sort through that. But that is public property that we can essentially do with as the community wants as we go through this. And it was a great point. We actually had a discussion in our goal setting process about the whether we should have an objective this year for redevelopment master planning the existing wastewater treatment site. And based on a number of things, we said, we don't need to do that this year. The timing is such that if we bite that off next year or the following year, then we'll be right on trajectory to start tearing it down and redeveloping it when we turn the secret valve that's going to move the stuff uphill, which is probably 5 or 6 years away.
Richard? I want to thank you for a lot of work. That was really good. One of the things that, I always go out and talk to people. And one of the things is that we need to have clear direction. And I think Mr. Buckingham said it well, vision, mission, and values. That, to me, is the core of what we're doing here. Currently, our mission statement for Morro Bay is pretty weak. Just so the public knows, I gave a handout to the council and the Planning Commission, and also it'll be available for public record. But basically, the issues that I see is having, it's one thing to have goals, but having a clear vision. For instance, economic vitality. Economic vitality could mean piggybacking a desal plant onto the once-through cooling inlet, having LNG offloading. That'll bring in a lot of, economics for the city. Economic vitality could mean focusing on making this a destination for families, or like some boards that currently are doing, are going after a niche market that is not really conducive with the family values. And that's why I feel that it is imperative that we establish with the workshop, like you talked about, what does the city see? When I look at this through my grandson's eyes. When he's 20 years old and he's looking at the city, what it's going to look like. Many of us may not even be here anymore, but our decisions and what we do now is going to have a huge impact on the people that don't vote right now but will. And some of these people are second, third generation. And when I look at it, like, are we gonna make it a fishing? Are we gonna keep that going? What is the direction that the planning commission is gonna take? Because it's gonna have an effect on how we look at the zoning, or how we look at the planning, or the special district, not special districts, but the specific plans. These are all things. Are we going to be building more homes for families? These are the kind of things that come to mind. And I think it's really imperative that the council give us a clear vision on which direction we as a commission are going to go, and all the subsequent staff and everything else. And then once we get that, then we got to boots to the ground and we got to get to work. Because, we really have a huge opportunity here to address our water issue, address our sewer issues, and energy issues as well. And we can be a showcase. I always felt that Morro Bay could be a showcase for the whole of California on what it looks like to be a sustainable community.
Well, I had one sort of general question and then one specific question. I'll start with the general question, which is, I'm wondering, just looking through the schedule and looking through the timeline, I'm wondering why we're doing the blueprint and the green print sequentially rather than on a parallel track, because it just seems to me that the kind of issues that are being, it seems to me, number one, that sort of sets the blueprint up as the limiting document for subsequently developing the green print. In other words, we'd like to have this environmental policy, but we can't do it because the blueprint says we have to have this land use in that location. And it seems to me that doing it in a parallel fashion would allow the green print process to inform the blueprint process a little bit more than doing them kind of one after the other. So I'm just curious as to what the reason for the sequential.
Well, I think the simple answer is that the blueprint is going to deal with what our land uses are, and then the green print's going to be the environmental component that goes after that. Now, that being said, I think maybe I'll ask PMC to come up here, and they kind of created the layout, and they have some pretty good reasons behind it, and I don't want to butcher them, so I'll let them speak since they're here.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council members, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Henderson with PMC, and we did assist the city with preparation of the work program. In response to the question about the sequencing of the blueprint and the green print, there's kind of two reasons for that. One is funding driven, in the sense that part of the direction here is to space portions of the general plan update out over time, such that they can be funded in multiple fiscal year cycles. Recognizing that at this point in time, the city does not have the full resource necessary to complete the process, we want to make sure that in the work plan, there are discrete deliverables for each step of the process in the event that the funding is not available for subsequent steps. The second reason for that sequencing ties back to the key issues that are summarized at the beginning of the work plan, and notably many of those key issues at the top of the list had to do with issues of economic vitality, of circulation, of neighborhood compatibility, which inherently are going to be the blueprint issues, which is kind of the reason that that's stacked up first. I think it's not to say that environmental considerations and sustainability considerations would not be inherent to the blueprint itself. I think as we look, as consultants look at the key issues associated with the blueprint, those will be fundamental considerations. It's simply a spacing of the blueprint ahead of the green print, primarily to satisfy the fiscal year constraints.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And the specific question I had to do with outreach. Are we looking at doing any sort of electronic outreach? I mean, this is 2015. I mean, something in the way of blogs, online discussion boards. I just wonder if there are not people in the community who would be more comfortable responding in that kind of a format than.
I think all of those things are on the table. Yeah, I think, we have to kind of delve into that and see what we're going to do. But yes, I think all those things, and those are ways people are used to communicating, especially now.
Right.
Your point is well taken, and I think that we should be trying to communicate in all of those in media. I think moving forward, and that's kind of been the discussion that we've had, I think, to this point anyway. So certainly.
I mean, I'm not all that tech savvy. Councilman Smuckler told me about a Dougal or a Doodle or something that he sent me today, but it just seems to me that that's the part of the way people communicate these days.
Certainly.
Okay, thanks, Commission. Thanks for all your comments. And with that, any questions to the left to start us off? Matt or Christine? Christine, would you like to lead us off?
Well, a lot of my questions have been answered. You guys, great points you bring up, so thank you. But Scott, one question I have for you in terms of Morro Bay issues, improving neighborhood compatibility guidance. Do you foresee, my question is, how could this work? And you talk about a citizen oversight board or committee in terms of developing that neighborhood compatibility viewpoint. Is that what you see first, or how would you go about it?
Well, the good thing is we're already doing it. We've been working with the Planning Commission. We've had, I think, 4 meetings on neighborhood compatibility and design guidelines. I haven't put it into a comprehensive document yet because I had broken it into 2 pieces with them. And now we have neighborhood group, a citizen group that's interested in it. So I think we're going to engage with that. I'm going to attend the meeting that they're having tomorrow night. And so I think that's going to pick this up and then probably help lead it forward. And so we're probably going to have some more, conversations at the Planning Commission level now that there seems to be a group that's interested in spearheading that. So it's going to be picked up in the general plan as a goal of the city, and it's going to be located in there somewhere. But I think we're probably going to inform a lot of that decision making as part of the interim design guidelines that we're going to come up with, and hopefully implement, and then that will that will eventually get pushed into what will be the zoning code or implementation plan later on down the road. So we'll be doing some of the. So that was a long answer. We'll be doing some of this in parallel.
Okay, and I guess I want to ask a follow-up, more naive question with that. In terms of neighborhood compatibility, identification of neighborhoods, planning structures, and I think in the past few months I've heard you guys talk about that at Planning Commission. Is that part of the general plan where you would identify the various zones or would that further on into the implementation plan?
Well, right now it's policy driven. It's basically we're coming up with interim guidelines that we're going to be adopted by a resolution versus by ordinance, because we're going to use them on an interim basis. Then something that could be extended if the council desires to extend it, and we'll be able to evaluate it. Like, we're going to implement it maybe for a year, and then I'll report back to the Planning Commission, then to the City Council about how it's working. and then we can make decisions at that time whether we want to continue it forward or not, or whether we want to tweak it, because, after using it for a year, we'll see what's worked and what hasn't, and I'm sure we'll get some pretty good feedback that way. And so down the road, we'll end up with a pretty good, hopefully, policy in place that we can use to put into what will be our zoning code, so it'll eventually be an ordinance. That's kind of how I'd see it playing out going down the road, given where we're at today.
And then also, we're talking about the funding, since funding is such a big issue, being that we have roughly maybe half of what we need. In terms of the calendar and the flow chart that you gave out, your plan in terms of this is a 2-3 year process. If we hit the ditch and we have no funding, is that part of the process? The planning is to say, okay, let's get this done in this interim until the next funding phase comes through?
When I get to the point where I'm negotiating the contract, I'm going to address it at that point, because we're going to have a fixed amount of money that we have up front that can get us however far down the road, depending on how the proposals come back. And I think I'll probably have wording in there that, as more funds become available, we expand the effort to include X, Y, and Z. That's kind of how I see it playing out, and it's going to be somewhat predicated on what the responses come back with. We have a kind of a range that PMC provided us with. They do general plan updates, so they would know. But we're going to get responses back from a lot of consulting firms, and so there'll be some different ways that they probably provide us funding options. And so I'll be curious to see what that looks like, and that'll help inform us and give us more. Part of the good thing about going out with an RFP and getting responses back is we get to see how many different firms look at these types of things and how they might schedule them and frame them, and we get to kind of pick and choose and put them all together in what we end up thinking is the best solution for Morro Bay. So that's kind of where it's going to go, I think.
Okay. Well, great. You've led me up to my last question. And in terms of, I know in the last 5 or 6 years, in terms of planning, we've had an on and off again kind of grant writing institution with staff just because of workload. Is that more clear and wide open now that we have dedicated time for grant writing, specifically since we didn't get the Caltrans grant, that we know what grants we're going forward with?
We have a dedicated person to grant writing on a contract basis, but she does work in-house and some from home. She's been dealing with grants and grant writing for many years, and she's pretty skillful. So we are looking for all grant opportunities that are out there, and we'll continue to do so. There's some things that are coming up that we're looking into right now, and in fact, I'll be meeting with GASCA later on. Either this week or next week. I have to look at my calendar to talk about some of them. So we are, again, actively looking, and we will probably be coming back to you to get authorization to apply for some more grants. That's what I would be anticipating moving forward. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Good question about grants. Follow up on that. Any analysis why we didn't get the Caltrans grant? Sometimes I know agencies will respond to you and tell you why. I'm just sort of curious.
We don't know yet, but we are in the process of scheduling that meeting. They did offer us that opportunity, and we will be meeting, at least having a phone conversation with them about what that is. So yes, we are following up to find out why we didn't grade out. Now, that being said, we are in District 5, and this grant cycle that came along last year, no one in District 5 received any money. So I think most of the money that came out of this grant cycle ended up, in the past anyway, going towards sort of the larger metropolitan areas, population, dense areas, and so that may have been what happened here. They may have placed more emphasis on the scoring, but we don't know yet, but we will be finding out.
Okay, great, thank you. And then currently going into the RFP selection process for the consultant, who will participate?
Well, I'm kind of anticipating forming the committee and having them be a part of that.
Okay, the GPAC, the general
Yes.
plan.
Yep. That's going to be
Advisory
hopefully, depending on how we come out of here, then yes.
Okay,
Plan.
great. That leads me into a lot of my GPAC questions. So you will be, Scott, the staff contact for that advisory board?
I will be.
Okay. And the timing for the recruitment then sounds like as soon as you can get it started?
As soon as you say we're okay with the way the work plan looks, because that's what I'm going to use for the RFP, and as soon as you say go make it happen, then I will be doing both of those things.
Okay,
I will be
great.
making that happen and finalizing the work plan, and we will be going out for the recruitment for that committee.
Okay, great. And then the who will facilitate? I agree with Dave, and I also agree with Mr. Silloway that talked about the most important part of this process is the first part of this process, and it sounds like that's good because you also echoed on the staff side that that's likely to be the most economical part of the process. So I think that's gives us a lot of hope, and we're aligned there. What the community wants, what we can afford, is a good thing. So my question is, who do you envision facilitating the work that the GPAC does on vision, mission, and values? Would you anticipate that will be one of the first work, something that the consultants will do, or will we try to do that internally? Just wondering about how that will play out.
It will be done in concert with the consultants that we hire. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
I mean, it needs to be, because they're going to be kind of driving the bus as far as getting the work products prepared, and they will be able to frame that, that effort probably better than staff, because hopefully we're going to hire a consultant that's done general plan updates and LCP updates.
Right, exactly. And for all of those, just for people too, that's part of what they do is community input is something they're skilled at doing.
Facilitation, yes, they tend to be excellent at it.
Okay, great. And then you mentioned the $100,000 from the one-time only Dynegy monies as a placeholder. So you're looking at suggesting some of those funds come into the 14-15 fiscal year, if I'm looking at the budget framework. Is that correct?
15,
to get us started like
15,
tomorrow. Is that correct?
15, 16, right?
Oh, so nothing for this year. Nothing to augment work being done starting tomorrow.
We have some funding right now, so that can start the process, and then moving into the next fiscal year, then we'll have other. Well, assuming you approve the budget with that in it, then we would have those funds moving forward. So yeah, it's going to dovetail together. I don't see any problems from a gap or anything. We have existing general plan maintenance funds that I can use for that, and that's to the tune of a little over $100,000.
Okay, so then when I look at the budget framework document under fiscal year 14-15, when I see funding gap, that's not really a funding gap, the $103,080?
Well, it's something that we don't have identified. We do have money.
Okay, we're not looking for that money necessarily. That's in the general plan.
Yeah, overall we have money identified in the form of grants, and we do have some money in our general plan maintenance fund that comes in as an impact fee on top of development.
Right, exactly. So that will get us started with the GPAC.
Yes.
Okay, and then you're looking for you're talking about $100,000 from the Dynegy one-time money going into 15-16.
Correct.
Okay, let me just review. Thanks. Those are all my questions. Appreciate it. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. John?
Thanks, Scott. Echo. Is that me? You? Okay, we're clear. We're clear. It's us. Great work, great questions, and I just want to commend you for a continuous what appears to be a significant amount of work output for one human being. And I know you do have a support staff of 1.5 maybe FTEs that assist you, but I think it's important to recognize that you, in conjunction with whatever resources, as limited as they are, have put out a significant amount of work, and I appreciate that. The first question that I have is, the meeting tomorrow night apparently is a community-organized meeting, which says to me, and from what I'm hearing in the community, as we banter around a lot of these terms, a significant contingent of the community has no idea what we're talking about. And so, in my opinion, from the input that I've gotten, so one of the precursors to the whole thing might be some educational sessions, and I understand we've had a couple, and that this may even be considered one, but some specifically scheduled 1 or 2 community education sessions about what a local plan, a general plan, and a local coastal plan is specifically. 2, I would just echo the question. I think that was raised had her name written down, but priorities with regard to goals that were listed on the goals page, and as they relate to this, hoping that this would be priority number one. It's my understanding that those goals were not listed in priority order. Is that correct, Mr. Buckingham?
That's
just wanted to
correct.
clarify that for
so
the public.
The 10 goals are they're not listed necessarily in priority order, nor are the objectives underneath them listed
Great.
necessarily in priority order.
Great.
Although I would say that not for the goals, but for the objectives underneath them, some of the cream rose to the top. So you'll notice that objective number 1 under planning documents is the general plan, local coastal plan. So perhaps you could say the things that were foremost in our minds tended to be toward the top, but but there is not an intent to prioritize those necessarily.
Good. One of the questions I also had with regard to the budget that you have laid out, have you considered the possibility of adding a column or columns for sources of funds to indicate where they might come from, just as a general
That's actually a good idea. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably something we could do, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Cool, okay.
Good idea.
Cool. And then internal available staff resources, you're stretched, and at least I think. and there are lots of other things that have to be done. Are you comfortable with your internal resource load in terms of the staffing that you have available to assist you in dealing with the consultants, whom will do a lot of the legwork, I understand, but there's also the maintenance of the mothership while all of this is occurring. And so I wouldn't want any of those functions to suffer, and that's my basic question for you.
We're operating at about max capacity right now, but we will make it happen.
So as the guy that has to manage that, let me say, I'm not comfortable.
Nor am I. So
in broadly speaking, so your staff is 20% smaller today than it was in 2005. That is significant. You will hear from management partners likely who you commissioned to study and analyze us. What you probably won't see is here's what you're not going to see is here's a bunch of things you can cut to save money. What you're going to see is here are the areas you're short, and you are therefore not providing the product that you need to be providing. So that said, we've had discussions here in this room of things that we are not going to be able to bite off and process in order to keep the capacity of Scott and his team focused so that they can do carry the big rocks like the general plan, local coastal plan, and continue the great improvement they've made in the day-to-day operations of building permits and planning items and those things. So, but we are at the cusp of dropping either the big rocks or not being responsive in our day-to-day operations, which are essential to keeping the community moving. And so I just say that as I appreciate Scott's can-do attitude, but I don't want that to be interpreted at all as great. Here's 3 more big ideas that we can ask him to finish this year.
And thusly, my point and the question leading to concerns about burnout and adequate resources to maintain other functions and those not suffering. So that will be a later comment. And then the selection process for the public group, just how many are you anticipating, how many people? 20, 30, 15, 10?
I'm not sure yet. I probably in the 7 range.
7 range
is what I'm looking at, and depending on how we seat it with representatives, if representatives of council want to be on it, do we have representatives from Planning Commission, and then how do we seat it from folks out in the public? I haven't framed it all yet, although I've been thinking about it a lot lately, so I'm not done yet, I guess.
Great.
The answer.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Noah?
Yes, thank you. A couple of quick questions. One is, we have talked in the past about the new general plan triggering or having a component where when we go online with the new water reclamation facility, it automatically triggers the demolition of the old wastewater treatment plant. Is that something you think we could build into this?
Well, I think certainly the documents that would go along with that can be built into that. I mean, we're going to have policy language that goes in there that talks about, reuse of that facility and what have you. And then it's also going to say, okay, well, now the document that's going to be is going to be some master plan, go do it. And then we'll be coming to you, assuming that gets adopted, and going, okay, council, here's what we're looking at from a standpoint of getting that plan prepared and done. And that plan will tell us and give us implementation timelines and goals to do that. I mean, we're on down the road, but that's how it works. I mean, this is the beginning portion to that is finding out and detailing what that's going to look like and what that effort moving forward will be, whether it's a specific plan, a master plan, or what have you.
Okay, great. And are you anticipating, and I know you are to a certain degree, doing some legwork on looking at what's been done with initial specific planning for, say, the downtown or Atascadero Road, for example, with Cal Poly and so forth, and utilizing some of that as possible?
We're going to utilize all of it, and you'll actually see even in the plan for the plan, some of the backup documentation that's in here, it identifies all of the city's current plans, and so picks those up and identifies that those should be used in the effort moving forward.
Great. A question I got a chance to ask Rob today, because I know people have brought it up, but it involves carrying capacity of infrastructure and utilities and so forth. And I did think it'd be important for you to be able to mention that publicly today. Rob mentioned that most likely for sewer and water anyway would be addressed through an update of the sewer and water master plans. Is that the way you understand it as well? And are you sure that will be able to inform then some of the assumptions that the blueprint works with?
It will inform the facilities component of the general plan. It has to. So yeah. And if we didn't have it and we weren't doing it, then it would identify that we needed to update those plans to achieve the wastewater treatment plant. The good thing is we're doing it in parallel, so it will inform the process and we'll have those new plans and it'll refer to those.
Okay, perfect. Do you have any thoughts about how you're going to approach the stakeholder interview component?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you have any thoughts about how you're going to approach the stakeholder interview component? There's a select number of time that would be available for stakeholders. Are you thinking, how do you avoid a situation where you set up stakeholder interviews and then you find there's a real large stakeholder that wasn't involved and feels left out and then creates an issue out of that?
Well, I don't know that you ever have to be completely done with that process. I mean, if we did find that there were folks that were left out, I think we could always go back and pick some of that back up. I mean, because the process is long, and it's multifaceted and multi-pronged oftentimes. So there were multiple efforts going on at the same time in many instances. I think it's okay if you do miss some of those things and you find out a little bit after the fact. I mean, if it's a year later, then I don't know what to say to you. But if it's a couple of weeks down the road or whatever, then I don't think there's any issue in picking back up with those people and getting that input.
Okay, thank you. And my last question kind of builds off what Dr. Teft talked about. He was mostly focusing on the green element, the green print. But I did notice, as I reviewed the document, there is really consistent language when we talk about the environmental or sustainability component of the plan and the importance of drafting that so that it doesn't limit our economic growth and potential. But at the same time, then when I read the environmental stewardship side, I don't see that also equalizing itself, showing that, hey, we all know that our economy is based on a healthy environment, whether it comes to tourism, fishing, or new emerging industries, people moving here because of the quality of life, or you could go on and on. So I see them both really dependent on each other. I think that's partially captured here, but I noticed that it's much stronger on the economic end. So I'm wondering how we could maybe adjust that to make sure that it's balanced tonight without having to delay this. I think it's really important and something that's backed up to a certain degree just from public comment and our historic discussions in the past about environmental stewardship being a key component. So how do you think we could do that?
I think I'll maybe see if PMC wants to come back up here again. Given that they created the framework for the document, I think maybe they might have a better idea about how to incorporate it back in there like that.
All right, thank you, Scott. I think it's a very good comment and could be accommodated through some additional wording added to the scope of the green print in particular, because I do agree. I think it does come across very strongly in the blueprint side, and maybe doesn't have a counterbalance in the green print side, and that's something we could certainly easily add to that.
Great. So
just based on general direction tonight, I think that's something we could work out with staff.
Okay, so with some council support on that, we could make those adjustments. I mean, I think it's in there, but it would be nice to. I think it is a bit off balance at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's good direction that we can certainly work with.
Those are my questions.
Okay, and I guess we can circle back to Noah's question. I just go through a couple questions I have. First of all, the grants that we have right now, can you explain the timeline? There's a timeline to the grants that we've received. Do you understand some of that right now? Can you explain that?
Yes, we have two grants. We have one from the Ocean Protection Council and another one from the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission, we have the grant agreement in play, and it was a approximately 2-year window. Our general plan update's a 3-year window, so we were running into a little bit of an issue there. We had some conversations going back and forth, are able to resolve it, so we're good to go. The Ocean Protection grant agreement, I don't know. That kind of went off into the abyss, and they're not being all that responsive to us right now. We're not the only agency that's having this problem. Ocean Protection Council is understaffed, and it's one of the reasons why their grant component of this actually moved over to the Coastal Commission for this latest round of grants, because they didn't have staff to do that. And so we're reminding them that we're here on about a weekly basis, maybe every other day, coming up here pretty quick because I'm getting tired of not being heard. But yeah, I mean, we don't have an exact time frame right now because that agreement's still in flux because we haven't gotten responses.
Okay. So just for sake of information, and I think some of the conversations we had in addition to where are the sources of funds coming from. So an example, what grant did we get this? I think I just want to be sure that the 497, actually 397,000 that we have, we don't necessarily have that. I just want to be sure that we all understand the Coastal Commission grant. That's not just funded because we're awarded. We draw on that as we use it. Is that correct?
That's how it works, yes.
Okay, so we don't actually have the $397,000 in the city's coffers. We draw on that as we use it. I just want to be sure that we all understand that.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, good. And then the other question, I guess, brief question for PMC, Mr. Henderson. I just wanted to, just for sake of information on this, was the plan for the plan that we developed, which is going to shape our RFP. Pretty cool when we look at how we want to go through this process. Just compliment all the work that we've done to get here. Our planning commission that we all sat together with during a joint meeting to go through the exercise of how are we going to do this? And so I just have to compliment what we have here today because that was the underlying question. We want to update our general plan, but how do we do it? Because we don't necessarily have the check to go ahead and say, okay, let's go about doing it. And really, what's the smart way of doing it? So you've shaped that based on the input. So this is just a question for information for our audience and for council as well, because this document is for Morro Bay, and I imagine if it were for Paso Robles, it would be significantly different. Could you just, for education, just really briefly kind of educate us on the differences there and why we've come to what we have today for Morro Bay?
Absolutely, and I think in large part it's reflective of the work session that was held in December. And the work plan that you have in front of you responds to some very unique characteristics of this project. The staging of the funding into multiple fiscal years, the priority of the issues as expressed in that December workshop, and the current status of your planning documents. There's some additional material toward the back of the packet that summarizes, what state law requires now for general plan updates and the status of your existing documents. So all of that was taken into account to produce something that is unique to Morro Bay. Another community is going to have a whole different set of issues with different priorities. And, we do work in a number of communities, and, that economic vitality goal does seem to be number one in most communities right now, just with the rebounding economy. But I do think that this is directly responsive to your concerns about neighborhood compatibility. It's directly responsive to sea level rise and other types of guidance that are coming forward from the Coastal Commission that need to be accommodated in a general plan update. It reflects your working waterfront as an important consideration, both from an economic development perspective as well as for your coastal plan, and a variety of other conditions that don't exist in other communities and are unique to Morro Bay. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to speak to that because I know, each city obviously is unique, and I think to get to where we are today and have this before us and taking the first step to get into it, kicking off a committee and everything else for a general plan update, big deal. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I don't think I have any more questions. I think we should wrap it up for discussion. But real briefly, Scott, what we need to do tonight is basically endorse this plan for the plan. Do we need a motion to endorse this for direction on how we want to do this? And in addition to a citizens advisory committee, just a question for
I think the
steps.
citizen advisory committee I'll probably bring back on consent for you to take a look at. And it needs to be scheduled on agendas, I think, as a separate action by the council. But I have a staff report for that. So that was going to be a separate item that I bring back. But yeah, if there's, Noah had the one, suggested change, and if you're in favor of that, I'd like to kind of know that I can direct the change and we can make that happen. And then if everybody's okay with it, then that's what we'll move forward as the basis of the RFP will be the work plan.
Yeah.
As amended, and I'll give you the final work plan on consent as well, so you'll have that finalized document too.
Okay. Any comments for Noah's request there? John?
Oh, specifically just Noah's request?
Well,
no.
Yeah. Okay.
None.
Anything else?
But no, I would just say that I would support Noah's request, and then we can move that along. And then I just want to appreciate everyone's input, and thank you to staff, thanks to consultants and to the Planning Commission. Maybe they might have a comment or two at the end as well. Yeah, thanks.
Yes. Anything else, John?
Yeah, just the other comment I was going to make is there's a huge difference between 1.590 versus 806,000. Obviously, my temperature rises when I see that. So approving the plan and the process I'm comfortable with, but financially, I need a lot more information before I'm going to be comfortable. And I know we're not looking for an absolute number.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, you're going to. I'll be bringing back eventually, the contract, and that's where the money will be at. You'll see it then, and you'll be authorizing me to move forward with the cost associated with it later on down.
And I did want to just really reemphasize mission, vision, values, and I think we've heard it. When the community has to schedule a meeting, and this is no disrespect to you or what you've done, to think about that and give comment about at least a single issue of the plan, I just really think it's important that we get that out there and that there's some education, even though we've attempted to reach out maybe one more time to help the community understand what this is all about.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Any more closing comments? Noah? None? Okay. Planning Commission?
I got a quick question.
Can we, Richard, I'm sorry, we're really close on time. Do you have any closing comments?
Oh, no.
Thank you.
I'll ask that.
Sorry, we just
okay.
had close on time. Thanks.
I would just piggyback on Noah's comment to say that not only do they need to be equalized, but I think it should be acknowledged that all are two separate processes.
How about Catherine's?
separate processes. Obviously, conservation and those elements are going to be considered in the blueprint, and economic and land use considerations will be a fundamental part of developing the green.
They're tied together, yes.
Okay, and with that, I'd just like to compliment our Planning Commission for their participation through all this process and effort, our staff for putting it all together, and PMC for their work on this. So, one final question. Did you need a motion on this, or are we in consensus and direction on what
I think the direction's all I need.
Okay, good. With that, we've concluded our closing comments, and we'll adjourn our special meeting. I just want to say thanks again for everybody's participation. Appreciate it. So, meeting adjourned.